So, just as I am setting up ready to finish this, I've just been listening live to the opening salvo, shall we say, of the Brexit deal that is currently being voted on, and I haven't stayed for the members, but I heard especially Boris's, which was a typical Boris speech, and to which he obviously lied through his teeth, and then of course, as to my surprise, as probably as to be many, probably the first time that Boris Johnson and co have probably talked more about fish in the House of Commons than ever before. And of course, it's full of lies, because as we keep on telling you, I am the king of fish here on YouTube, and I've probably told and talked more about the reality of the problems facing fishermen in the UK than anywhere else. And hey, if you think UK fishermen have a problem, you've only got to look at places like Denmark. Denmark has also seen their fisheries and their fishermen industry decrease. Why? Because technology, innovation, and a myriad of other things that are affecting the fishing industry, not just in the UK, are also affecting other countries. The fishing industry in other countries just isn't that big. And Boris was boasting about, oh, we're going to catch all these extra millions of fish. Britain cannot become rich on fish. It just will not happen. Let alone the UK, as we've said before, the reality is people in the UK just don't eat that many fish. There is a reason why over 80% practically of all the fish caught that our British fleet catches goes to the EU. They eat far more fish than we do. And come at the end of those 5 years, there will be very likely a possible tariff barriers. Who knows? But whatever the hell the Conservatives cook up to somehow replace the common fisheries policy. There's got to be something to replace it at the end of the 5 years, and at the moment we ain't hearing anything. Boris is promising to, quote, level up the fishing fleet so they can upgrade their boats. But what exactly, money-wise, are you going to give them? What are you going to give them? You haven't said anything about this. Of course, this is the exact same promise Boris has made about levelling up, the economically left behind parts of the country. And of course, we saw that, that quote announcement. And of course, it's all talk and no policy. And at the end of the day, if Boris ain't talking about policy and what that is and what the bill is, it ain't worth squat. And then, of course, came the real issue. And I'm glad Starmer brought this up, because this is, as the article we're about to go through, this is the Brexit arguments pretty much set out for the next decade. And currently, if the Prime Minister, as he has said, now is, the UK is now a sovereign state, free to make its own rules regarding trade and regulations, all these things. The problem is, the second Boris or the Conservatives decide to exercise that right, up go the barriers, up go the tariffs. And the argument, the main core for argument for all this time and period, and we know the Conservatives are going to do it, is the bet that somehow the Tories can regulate the economy better than the EU. But the thing is, the Tories, being run by currently the free market fundamentalists, are basically obsessed with getting as much government regulation out of the market as possible. And that means deregulation. And the second that happens, up go the tariff barriers, up go those. That will happen, and these will be the arguments that we are going to be having for well over the next decade because of the Tory party. Like I say, this deal is just not a good deal. I'm glad that we've got one and avoided a no deal, but this is just altogether an absolutely god-awful agreement. And it was funny because Theresa May got up and said that she didn't want to be lectured by the current leader of the opposition because he could have voted for a better deal all those years ago. To Theresa May, I say, hey, there's people sitting behind you and in front of you that could have also voted for your better deal. Because, ironically, Theresa May's deal was better than the current one we have now. But, this all goes to the argument of, well, why didn't we support those deals? It was because of people in the ERG, people who are the hardcore Brexiteers who wanted to push for the hardest Brexit they possibly could. And to that extent, they have succeeded. They may be pleased now, but they probably won't be maybe in a couple of months' time. We'll have to see. But anyway, we'll get onto this article. So, as always, please do remember to hit that like and share button, and of course, down below there is a link to my Patreon page and a one-off donation link. And today we turn to politics.co.uk and, of course, the fantastic Ian Dunt. And this title is The Never-Ending Story. It really is. The deal unravels the next Brexit arguments. The deal Boris Johnson brought back from Brussels should be a prized moment of triumph for the Brexit hardline political leaders. The war is won. No free movement or single market or customs union, Britain even out of the most harmless European programmes or regulators like Erasmus or the European Aviation Safety Authority. Everything settled, it's a total victory. So it's interesting that the deal isn't really the end of something at all. It's the start of it. It is the creation of a formula of further conversations in which Britain can either pull further away from Europe or walk closer towards it. But all the dynamics we see in terms of the structure of the agreement, the economic repercussions, and the likely political motivations of future government point towards reintegration with Europe. The document is a testament to Brexit's victory, but it contains in it the flaws which will undermine, perhaps even reverse it as a project. The central accomplishment of the deal is to secure zero tariff. That's what both sides wanted, it's what they got. This shouldn't be brushed aside. If this were not the case, parts of the manufacturing and most of the farming industry would become unprofitable overnight. But elsewhere, the deal is really quite strikingly poor, even by the standards of the government itself set. The British team hoped the professional qualifications on both sides would be mutually recognised. They failed. They had hoped to secure equivalence agreement on sanitary and phytosanitary measures and reduce the hassle of checks on agricultural goods, like the EU offered to New Zealand and Japan. They failed. They tried to secure mutual recognition of conformity assessments so that domestic bodies could certify goods for the EU market like the EU offered Canada and the US. They failed. But then it's possible the government never really cared about these issues, or it just didn't have the capacity to pursue them, giving them the tight time frame of COVID. So it's worth looking instead at the two areas they really did care about: the level playing field and fishing. The level playing field involves policy areas like labour rights, the environmental and state aid, where a government subsidises a sector in a way that disadvantages its competitors. The EU's opening position was that the UK align dynamically with its law on state aid under the European Court of Justice jurisdiction. Over the summer, it gave up on that and instead demanded a domestic state aid enforcement programmes from the UK, which would lead to arbitration in the case of a breach and tariff if one side was found to have broken their word. And after a lot of screaming and shouting about needless fuss, that was basically what they got. Each side has to maintain a body to oversee its subsidy control regime and a court of tribunal to try subsidy cases. If subsidy breaches the agreement, the court can order it to be recouped if a dispute over subsidies is not solved by the consultation between the EU and the UK. Each party can resort to a remedial measures. There is an arbitration before the countermeasures are imposed, and possibly afterwards if one party says they are disproportionate. If they find there was a breach, it can authorise a suspension of parts of the trade agreement. On labour standards and the environmental one, both sides commit to not lowering protections with a right to proportionate countermeasures in the event of a breach with a material impact on the trade or investment. Those countermeasures will be subject to review by an arbitration tribunal. But there is also an agreement which sits above all those specific provisions. It is called rebalancing. This is not about maintaining present standards, it's about what happens in the future. If either party decides there have been significant divergences in the level playing field, which are having a major impact on trade and investment, they can impose rebalancing measures in the form of tariffs. After 4 years, if one side decides there have been too many breaches, they can trigger a review of the whole part of the trade agreement, leading to a potential suspension of the whole thing, and other linked aspects like transport. Basically, the threat of a no deal hasn't gone away even now. If it can't be imposed, this again, it just gets absolutely ridiculous when you realise this. Sorry, where were we? Leading to a potential suspension of the whole thing, like other linked aspects like transport. And basically the threat of a no deal hasn't gone away even now. It can still be imposed after a few years if the two sides diverge. Fishing. The results of the fishing follow a similar pattern. The opening EU position was that Britain should maintain the position it had in the EU. This involves a complex interplay of arrangements. Basically, the stock of fish species are divided up between the countries in a set quotas which do not change. Then, each year, scientists provide advice on a total allowable catch. Britain's position was that it was now an independent coastal state, and that it would decide on what in its waters essentially it wanted to turn into Norway. Each gets together with the EU every year, and then each sorts out the quota. If no agreement is reached, Norway can tell them they can't fish in their waters. Legally, Britain's position was completely sound, but it did have a problem with leverage. Britain does not eat its own fish. 80% of what it catches goes to the EU. So, if the UK refused to play ball, the EU would simply apply tariffs on fish, which are very high, and would make the sector unprofitable. You could catch all the fish you wanted, you just wouldn't be able to sell them. Many experts thought the UK would fail to get to the EU to reopen the tortured quota question, but in fact it secured a 25% increase in the value of the EU catch in UK waters. Less than it wanted, but a decent result. There'll be an adjustment period of about 5.5 years. This new quota then becomes the baseline for a 2026 Norway annual negotiations to decide access. But an interesting thing happens if the UK tries to block or limit EU access to its waters. The EU can retaliate by limiting access to its waters, or more damagingly, simply apply tariffs on fish or other goods, or even suspending other parts of the deal. Either side can terminate the agreement, but if they do it automatically and terminates the trade, aviation, roads, transport sectors, basically it's a no-deal guillotine all over again. Boris Johnson claimed that after 5.5-year adjustment period is over, Britain could catch all the fish it wants. In fact, this is incorrect. The deal clearly states that after this period, the quota will stay at the point of initial reduction. So of course the UK can close its waters if it wants to, but tariffs will go up. This dynamic is very similar to the one experienced by countries like Norway in the EAA agreement. The technicality of having a way of vetoing European law is called Article 102, the right of reservation. Norway even came pretty close to it during using it over the Postal Services Directive, but they didn't. It would neutralise that whole part of the agreement, so they never do because the consequences are just far too dire. This is the great advantage the EU has. It is an advantage of size, but it is also solidarity. The UK can't pick countries and sell them fish and sell to them fish one to one. If not, the tariffs will just go up with another. The tariffs are the same for all. This is what gives the EU its strength. It's why the UK mostly capitulated, and it's why the dynamic is likely to remain the same in the future. After all, this is the most messianically pro-Brexit government we're likely to see. If they didn't take no deal in the face of EU leverage, how likely is it on a future one actually will? There is ultimately no closure here. We are going to see the same dynamic in future we have witnessed over the last 4 years, constantly talking and bickering, with the UK facing the reality of the EU leverage. The deal sets up new institutional structures and joint parental partnership council. So you better get used to that name. You'll be hearing a lot of it over the next few years. It'll be formed over 30 sub-councils, each focusing on a specific area of the agreement. What was once done in the Council and Commission will be done through a vast array of specialised committees and working groups. As time goes on, more of these committees will emerge. On things like financial services, they become added to the framework of the agreement. And every 5 years, the UK and the EU will review the agreement, supplementary agreements, and any matters related to it. That corresponds to a standard 5-year political timetable in Brussels and Westminster. In other words, each new Westminster Parliament or Council President or European Parliament is going to have their own Brexit, their own appraisal of the relationship. This is like pursuing a living deal. The metaphor of a divorce no longer really holds. It's like a couple splitting up, then buying a much smaller house where they'll meet up at weekends. Maybe they'll be sick of each other by the time they arrive. Maybe they'll start to remember what they saw in each other in the first place. Divergence or integration. For the next couple of years, Johnson will try to prove the benefits of the former. But in the medium to long term, the good money is on the latter. Future Labour governments will seek closer ties on security, trade and smaller items like Erasmus. More pro-business Tory administrators without the current ERG baggage may well pursue the same. Businesses will lobby constantly for the UK to avoid regulatory divergence because it will increase the cost of export to Europe. And most importantly, the EU has very broad powers in the agreement to punish divergence. It can suspend parts of the agreement or just simply apply tariffs. So structurally and economically and politically, the winds blow in the direction of integration. It's not conspiracy or magic, it's just that people trade most with places they are close and big. And when they trade, they want less friction. Brexit has done many shocking things, but it cannot negate the objective reality of geography or trade flows. Even in the moment of Brexit's triumph, it carries the seeds of its own failure. And and just as what we were saying at the beginning there, of what we saw, we will have this Brexit argument continuously play out again and again and again. And until, we see, more it will be, because this government ain't likely to want to try and pursue closer integration with the EU. They are going to try and diverge. And that will be interesting when they try and diverge, because sooner or later Boris is going to try it. And then that's when this stuff kicks in. And remember, the no deal guillotine now constantly is swinging over our heads. This was put in place not because of Remainers who wanted a better deal. This was put in place by the Brexiteers, who wanted to try and get the hardest Brexit deal they possible and still want to try and diverge because they are free market fundamentalists who are driven by the obsession to get as much government regulation out of the market as they possibly can so that businesses and corporations can just run wild and have fun and cause all sorts of calamities and catastrophes that they want. And so, with that said, thanks for watching. Please do remember to hit that like and share button on your way out. And of course, down below there is a link to my Patreon page and a one-off donation link. And thank you, as always, very much for watching.